Okay. And to go back real quickly, I'm going to do a little bit of review before we go in too deep, and actually take a look at some basic features, because I have a feeling, and I saw it in the chat as well, that not all of you may have attended the previous workshop, but I hope you have a little bit of familiarity with Google Forms. But actually, before I do that, if you registered for this workshop, Andrea was kind enough to send out a couple of links to you via the calendar invite that you should have received within your Los Rios Excel, or I'm sorry, not Excel, Exchange calendar. So there are 2 links in there, and I'm also going to be putting those links into the chat again, so not to worry. But one is for these slides. So if you would like to use these slides and follow along during the presentation, let's say if you have a second monitor, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, I designed them in a way that you can take them with you for future reference, and that they'll hopefully give you pointers as to how to get back to the features that we're going to be discussing today. The second link is for a form, and we'll get there in just a second, that I will show you guys to start with, and then I'm going to be brave enough to share that form with all of you. And there's some limitations, I'll talk about it as we get, so that you can copy down that form and use it as the basis for this workshop. Okay, so that way we're not starting from scratch. You'll have a form to work with, and I will get those links to you here in the near future via chat, but you already have them within your Exchange, within your calendar invite.
Put both of them in the chat for you guys.
Okay, thank you.
It's in the chat.
I appreciate that very much, Andrea. Why Google Forms? Okay, first of all, and I'll quote Dr. Merle Martin, who was one of my professors at Cal State Sacramento way back when I was working on my MIS degree. And he said, if you are creating documents, try to create what he calls turnaround documents. Okay, and it's very interesting. I was watching the news this morning, and we are celebrating, and drum roll please, 50 years of the barcode. So they're not quite sure as to who invented it apparently, but IBM registered their standard, registered their patent, I guess, and that kind of became the standard for barcodes. So that happened 50 years ago. Now, and of course, for you and me, what does that mean? Well, for you and me, that means when we go to a grocery store for the last 30 years, we haven't had to have somebody type in some kind of a SKU number along those lines. We just, have the cash register. Or these days, we oftentimes do it ourselves, right? Swipe the item across a laser-based, usually barcode reader, and that makes it easy for the price lookup function to then add it to our tab, right? Well, guess what? A similar kind of concept is that we have these Google Forms available in a digital format. So whatever content is submitted to us is more easily sortable. It can be relatively easily aggregated, meaning it can be added up, sorted, etc. And we can do that within Google Sheets. But we can also, another nice format is we can also republish it relatively easily in a different format. Okay, and that's where Google Forms are great to be able to allow us to do that. And the different kinds of data that we can gather with Google Forms. And again, if you were in the first workshop, we talked about all of these. There's your short answer versus paragraph, right? So if you're just capturing a name, for example, that's one thing. If you want somebody to be able to type a little bit more, you can do that with a paragraph function. We have different ways of gathering multiple choice, checkboxes, or drop-down menu information that would be input about certain preset items. Date and time is somewhat important to have that separate, because that allows us to sequence things more easily and to bring things in a standardized format, which is different from how we might be able to do it in a short answer area otherwise. But some of the other things we're going to talk about today that we hadn't really addressed in the previous workshop, we're going to talk about file uploads. So yes, you can actually solicit file uploads, and I'll show you how that's done and how to do that with Google Forms. We'll talk about grids. We're not going to talk about scales really today, but it falls along the same lines. But again, gathering much information. And then we are, because sometimes there is that TMI, that's too much information. I'm going to show you guys how to split your form into multiple sections. So those are all things that can be done. And if you haven't already done so, this would be your time as we're getting started, and I'll do a little bit more review, to log into your Google Apps for Los Rios. Okay. And if you go to apps.losrios.edu, then log on if you're not already logged on. And then one of the tiles that you will see when you get in will be your Google Drive. Okay, and go ahead and select that while you are in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly share, change my sharing here on my laptop so I can show you guys how to do this. So again, if you have right here I'm already logged on to my Google Apps. Okay. But this is if you go to Google Drive where you're going to end up, and that happens to be my Google Drive right here. And of course, chances are you don't have quite as many folders as I do in here. But that's where you're going to be in the Drive itself. Okay. And then once you're in Drive, notice up here, I'm going to go to this icon right here, which says Google Apps. Okay. And when you go to Google Apps, then if you may need to scroll down a little bit because there's quite a few different options, as you can see right here. One of the options in the color purple will be Forms. So if you get yourself to Google Forms, then your screen will look something like this. And again, chances are it won't be quite as busy as mine does unless you do a lot of work with Google Forms or preparation for Google Forms workshops. So that's where you should find yourself at this point in time. So that's the general Google Forms area. Okay, and I'll let everybody catch up as you're doing that. Again, how did I get there? I used the Google Apps icon right up here near the top right-hand corner of your screen. And then from that list of apps, I selected Google Forms. So let me keep going with the review real quickly while you guys are getting yourself there. And then we'll catch everybody up once we're there. So for those of us who did the workshop last time, and for the rest of you who may have used Google Forms before, sometimes, of course, rather than create a new form, we're going to access existing Google Forms for editing. Okay, and if I move back to the Google Forms area, I've got my recent forms area right down here in the bottom half of the screen. Okay, and that's where those are located. But of course, if we have a lot of forms, sometimes they would not necessarily be in this location. So another place where you might find forms that you've previously used, and I'm showing you this now because at some point in time you might, again, be in a situation where you have a lot of forms that you've done and used and you're not quite sure. And there's a reason for this. You want to be able to find old forms. I'll mention that in just a second. But if you go back to your Google Drive, okay, and again, if you need to open a new tab to do this, for your plus sign, and then within your Google, select Google Drive from your list of apps near the top right-hand corner. In your Google Drive, when you take a look at the root folder or list of folders, there will be a folder called Forms. Okay, and mine is right here, okay, in the light blue on the screen. And if you double click on Forms, these are the forms that I have created in my Los Rios Google account. Now, one more caveat right here, because sometimes I see people get lost with this. Most of us, especially those of us who are not part of the Appleverse, have both a work Google account and a personal Google account. And as we balance those two, it is actually very much possible to be logged into multiple Google accounts on the same computer. Okay, in fact, I'm also part of a committee where I deal with folks regularly, and I'm logged into 3 different, actually with a Oompa band I play in 4 different Google accounts at the same time. So you want to be careful that you are looking in the right Google account for the forms that you've created. And I've got a question here on site. Give me just 1 second.
Yeah, so I went into my drive, but I don't have a folder called forms.
Have you created any Google Forms yet?
I just created one.
You created one, and they're not in your Forms folder.
I don't know.
Not at this point in time? Okay.
Did you create your folder or did it
No,
auto
it
create?
should have done it automatically, I'm pretty sure. So,
Can we ask the audience if they have that, or is it?
yeah, let me see. For those of you out there who've previously created a Google form, do you find your Forms folder as well within
No.
your... Yes, I'm getting a yes from
No.
Heather.
No, I don't see my
Yes.
my folder for forms either, and I have
Not either,
previously
okay.
created them.
Then let me ask let me direct you the other way. If you go back to and just click on My Drive, if you click on My Drive and then scroll down, do you find the form that you've created in the what
Yes.
could be a long list? Okay,
Yes.
all right. So I have also found that sometimes different versions of Google Drive will function slightly differently, though at this point in time, I'm not 1,000% sure that whether I created that folder or if it created it for me.
Okay.
So yeah, if you don't have a Forms folder, then it would be just in what's called the root folder of your Google Drive at the bottom right there. I'm glad you asked. Thank you very much. Yeah, so that's where those other forms would be. Because remember, at the end of the day, a Google form is really just a file. Okay, because I mean that the system has to store it somewhere. What we're actually going to end up with today is several files to be able to do this for us properly. But again, let me go back to my Forms folder here. But yeah, you may not have that Forms folder. It may just be in your general, again, recent forms in that area. But glad you asked. Yeah. All right. Get myself back to my slideshow here. So the reason I mentioned that you need to be able to find previous folders, because there's a relatively new feature in Google Forms where you can actually take existing forms components and move them into new forms. Okay. So if you're using Google Forms regularly, there is no need to recreate the wheel every single time. So you can actually go into a form and select multiple items from a form and import that into a new form that you may be creating. Okay, that's a feature I hadn't really thought about covering today, because that's typically relatively easy to figure out as long as you know that the feature exists. Okay, but as you're taking notes, keep in mind that you don't need to recreate from scratch. And actually, that's what I'm having you do today. I'm actually going to make a form available to you guys to use for the basis of a new form. Okay, couple more things to finish before I get started with the actual form. Remember that when you are distributing a form, you're sending a link to the form. You're not sending the Google form itself. So it's not like an attachment, okay, like when you send documents to other folks, for example. Okay, because remember, the form is a file that exists within your Google Apps. So while it's technically a file, you're not distributing the file to have somebody input, the data. You're actually distributing the link, the URL, to the form. And with that, it's very important to remember that Google Forms have two URLs. One is for editing, and the other one is for responding, for the folks who should be filling out the form. Okay, so we have two different links that we would use. One, again, for editing, and that's the one that we're going to go to in a second to build it. And then the other one, which you would send to folks who are going to be filling out the form. Okay, any questions at this point in time? I'm trying to monitor the chat a little bit as well. Okay, all right, good so far. Okay, all right. And, don't hesitate to even speak up. Try to monitor the chat if there's any questions. Any questions right now? question in here, yes.
So if there's a form out there that somebody else created, am I able to also do the same process for pulling some of that information and recreating a new form?
Very, very good question. So I'll repeat it for the audience at home in case you didn't hear, but if somebody else created a form, right, can they make those features available to us so that we can reuse those features? And the answer is absolutely yes. And in order for them to be able to do that, in fact, they need to make us what's called collaborators. So, and I will show you how to do that in just a second, because I'm going to take a perfectly good form and I'm going to let my students touch it, which is always one of those very risky things to do, but I trust you guys very much so. But yes, so even if somebody else has done something, and that wheel does not need to be recreated, okay? So in fact, what I'm going to do at this point in time is I am actually going to make a modification to a form to allow it to be for you guys to be collaborators. So here is how I'm going to do this. Let me change my share. Okay, so this is the form called Faculty Office Hours Submission Form. Okay, and right now, the person who is able to edit this form is yours truly. Okay, now what I can do, however, is when I click on my traffic light or my snowman, depending on how you want to call that icon in the top right-hand corner, I can then add collaborators. Okay, so when I click on that option to add collaborators, I then have my Google, and if you've ever shared Google Docs, this should look somewhat familiar to you, okay? But I can now basically share this form. Now notice, they don't use the share terminology because this is a different beast, okay? And again, we're not sharing something that somebody else could take. We're sharing something that we're currently working on and collaborating on. So the way that I'm going to share this at this point in time is I'm going to change it from restricted, which means that only people with access, which would be me, okay, unless I specifically say up here, somebody else could individually do it. I'm actually going to open it up, anyone with the link, and notice, I have no control over to which extent I give them the chance to make changes. The only way that this is shared is as what's called editing, okay? Which means that other people can do whatever with this form, including making changes to it, including deleting it, etc. Okay, so that's the bad part about it, is that's only as far as I'm going to go with this. And if you notice, for that reason, I actually created a backup copy, just in case. I love you guys, but I don't trust you.
Right,
So,
I started filling
okay.
out, I thought I was filling out the form one time, but I was
Yeah.
actually editing it, it said name, and I started putting my name in there.
Yep. So what they may have done is they may have actually sent you the wrong link as well
Okay,
for the form
yeah.
otherwise, right? And that's, so again, that's, keep in mind, you've got the sharing link for people to fill out, and then the other one for us to be able to edit and collaborate. So that's what we're doing right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my responder link at this point in time, and I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm going to get that one later, okay? Because that's not what's going to help you at this point in time as part of this workshop. But what I am going to do, I'm now, since I have made this wide open now, going to take this URL, which is the URL for up on top here for my form, for my Google form, and I'm going to put that in the chat. Okay, and I want you guys to, at this point in time, go there. Please do not make any changes as you go there, but go ahead and click on that form and you should be able to access it. And then we get a couple of thumbs up at home if you're able to see it. The form should look basically like what you're seeing in front of you right here. Okay, Julia's got it, Syra has got it. Okay, all right, Julie does as well. C-Bank, perfect. Okay, good. So at this point in time, you have full edit capability over this form. Please don't use it. I'm going to have you do something with the form here in just a second. And got a question here. Hang on, everybody.
I think this is what happened with mine.
Okay, so you're currently actually in the Zoom So go ahead and minimize the Zoom meeting because I don't want you to actually look at that. So now go ahead and go to your, actually go back to Zoom and go to the chat.
I think I clicked on chat.
Okay, and then click on where the link that I placed.
Oh.
There you go. You are right there.
I don't know what I did, but
All right.
thank you.
That absolutely. Okay. All right. So here's what I want you to do with this so that you don't do any damage to my form. And it's perfectly fine. But go back to the snowman up on top right hand corner, go to the snowman and select make a copy. Okay. So what you are going to do now is you are going to create a copy of faculty office hours submission form. Okay. And you are going to create that copy in your own Google Drive. So if you want to click on folders right here, now notice I happen to have the forms subfolder. By default, it will just say like my drive, okay? And then go ahead and say select, okay, if you want to put it into my drive, okay? And let me go down here and make that change. I've got too many things going on. Hang on just a second. There we go. All right. So again, change it to my drive. There we go. Select and then make a copy. Go ahead and do that. So at this point in time, you have your own copy, as it says up in the top left-hand corner, of this form in your own drive. Okay. Now, I'm getting a message here that's saying, missing file upload folders. Okay, the folder containing responses to file upload questions can't be found. This form won't resume collecting responses until the folder is restored. So here's what happened. Somebody else created a form, people submitted responses. Those responses were in a separate location that was tied to the original form. At this point in time, since we made a copy of the original form, the responses were not shared. We just shared the form. So at this point in time, we need to click restore to create this upload folder. Now, this only applies when you are dealing with a form that allows file uploads, which means that if you have been working with Google Forms previously, if you've made copies of Google Forms previously, but those Google Forms did not allow users to upload files, you didn't get this message. Okay, but just say restore and the problem will be solved and Google handles that for us. Okay.
Professor Geisler?
Yes, please, call me Marcus.
Oh, thank you, Marcus. So when I clicked on restore, I got a pop-up message that says file upload limit reached. And then there's a paragraph. I won't bore you with the whole thing.
You broke it.
You probably know what that message says. I don't want to bore everybody with the verbatim of it.
No, interesting. So here's my question. And one, as far as I know, and don't tell anybody, those Rios accounts don't have any quotas, any limits. Are you by any chance logged into your personal Google account rather than those Rios one?
That's a great question. Let me see here.
And it should tell you up here in the top right-hand corner. If you notice right here is my smile right here, and this is my Los Rios Google account. If the address that's associated with your smile up there, or with maybe your initials, is not your W number, then maybe you're in your personal account instead.
Actually, it is my W number.
It is, okay.
Yes.
And somebody in IT does not like you. No, just kidding. Yeah, I haven't encountered that one before.
Okay.
My suggestion, go back to the other link in the chat and try it again and see what happens.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, and then hopefully that'll solve the problem for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. All right, let's take a look for the rest of us then what we have here. Okay, and basically I tried to find an example of, you know, and I love Estella, our admin in BCS, but you know, she sends out, and I'm assuming this happens in all the other areas, these, you know, office hour submission forms, you know, and then we get another one just before finals week, And, boy, this is the 21st century. We should be able to, automate, sorry, Estella, some of these things right here, right? I'm assuming Estella's not the only one. I'm assuming she has, certain requirements that things need to be done a certain way. So that's my approach. But this is an example of where we can take a business process and we can automate it with a Google form. Okay. And hopefully for my faculty colleagues who are on, obviously you would be on the opposite side of this, but hopefully this gives you an idea as to, okay, well, this is the kind of thing that this could be used for, like within your classes. And of course, while, students are in Canvas and that works for many processes, but with some, I found that Google Forms are actually quite effective. So let's take a look at this form right here. So we've got a basic introduction. We've got a title, first of all, okay? And if you want to rename a form, it's really easy to do. Notice up here in the top left-hand corner, it called it copy of faculty office hours, okay? Since you created a copy and it's now yours, if you wanted to delete that copy of, okay, and rename that form, I'm going to call mine number 2 at the end, just because I think I have a duplicate. But you can rename the form right there. Just press enter. It'll go away from that cell, and you have now assigned a new name to that form very transparently. And of course, if you remember, we don't have to save forms in Google ever, right? Because it's automatically done within Google Forms, so no problem there. Form has introductions as to what to do, okay? And we all know how good people are at reading instructions, but we're going to put them there anyway, because it's going to be helpful, okay? And then we've got, so this is basically just a text area, and then we've got what are called questions, okay? And the first question, I called it semester, and semester has underneath it a description, okay? Now, by default, the description doesn't appear. So if you've used Google Forms before, chances are that description is not available to you until you follow me to the bottom right-hand corner of my dialog box and click on the snowman where it says more options. One of the options is description, okay? And notice mine is checked, which means I have turned this option on. If yours is not checked, which of course at this point in time it should be since you copied my form, okay? But let's click on it to turn it off, and notice at that point in time, the description disappears, okay? And if you go back to the snowman, you turn it back on, the description should reappear, except Google Docs is only so good about remembering something that you didn't save. So at this point in time, it's gone. I know. Okay, now, come on, Marcus, isn't there like an undo that you can do? Well, let's try. Control Z to undo. There you go. Control Z to undo. Okay, there is an undo function. And by the way, up in the top, if you notice, you have your undo and redo near the top right-hand corner there as well. So it's not all that bad. If you mess up, Google is very forgiving. Okay, all right. So we've got that part of a question, and of course, there's lots more questions. So here we've got, at this point in time, different question types. Here is my short answer for the instructor, last name and first name, office location, same thing, phone number, office hours, Zoom link, etc. And then I've created multiple sections. And this may appear a little bit laborious, but sometimes faculty do have multiple office hours on the same day, and you need to allow them the possibility. And that's kind of, we need to take a look at the business processes, right, that you're trying to automate and do it that way. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. Actually, in fact, I'm going to scroll down all the way to the bottom, which is section number 7. And what I want you to do with section 7 is delete it, because we are going to recreate it. How do you delete a section? You click on the snowman that is associated with the section title right here. Okay, here's your section title, and the snowman in the top right-hand corner. Go ahead and click on delete section. Not to worry, we are going to bring it back, and we're going to teach you a few things along the way. Go ahead and delete that section, and it's going to warn you, hey, deleting that section will also delete all the questions and responses within that section. What do you mean responses? So you're saying that, ex post facto, if there were things that I've previously recorded If I delete this section, is that then going to go away? Short answer is yes, it will. So make sure that you design your form properly the first time, ideally. Now, what you could always do, rather than delete a section, is skip the section within your form. We'll talk about how to do that in just a second. But you know, plan up properly. Now, there's an opportunity to preserve the questions if you'd rather, but that's not what we're going to do right now. We're actually going to delete. We're going to say okay. Which means at this point in time, we only have 6 sections, section 6 of 6. Okay. All right. So the form is now yours. Now let's see what we can do with that form. Now I'm going to take us back to the slides real quickly to see what we can do from here. And what we're going to do is subdivide the forms into sections, as we've already done. We're going to create a new section. Okay. And now, why would I do sections? Let's take a look at the preview of the form. To get to the preview of a form, go back to the top of the form. So I'm going to be in share mode. Okay. And at the top, you have your eye right here where it says preview. Okay. Click on preview. And here's now what the form looks like. Okay. And let's start filling this out. And it's actually a good thing that Google is smart and remembers, because we only, as we're testing this, we only have to fill this out once, maybe twice if we mess things up. But let's say we're having faculty submit office hours for the fall, for spring 2023. Why not? Okay. And we are having faculty submit the final week office hours for the semester. Okay. Now, for instructor last name, put in your information. Or if you'd rather not put in yours, Google is always watching. If you want to put in Bill Gates there, by all means. Okay. All right. An office location. Where are you going to hold those office hours? Okay. I'm in BS 137. And where can students reach you? Okay. And I actually give them my cell phone number. Well, it's a Google Voice number that goes to my cell phone number when I want it to, but close enough. And then if I have a Zoom link, I can do a Zoom link. Now, by the way, did you know that if you are in a Zoom session, that you can go to the top right-hand corner of your Zoom session, and you can click on that Zoom session, and it will then tell you right here, hang on, right. It's not working in my setup in here. Hang on, just 1 second. Oh, let me stop sharing. I'm going to go to the top right-hand corner of my screen in my Zoom session. I can say copy link, and that will allow me to then take my current Zoom sessions URL and paste it someplace else if I choose to do so. So let me go back to my form. Okay. And on my form, here's my, hang on, my preview. I'm looking at multiple screens here. Hang on just 1 second. There's a bit of a delay on my screen on top here. Hang on. Okay. So I can now go to my form that I filled in, and I'm still suffering from a delay here. Hang on just 1 second. This one, oh, much better. There we go. All right. So now I can say paste, and here's my Zoom link. Okay. And now I'm going to say next. And here are now the opportunities to fill in office hours. So let's say, and you can do this with me, pick an hour. Let's say on Monday, start of office hour is going to be from, I don't know, 10 a.m. And you can just tap, if you would rather, then with the mouse to 11 a.m. Okay. And where's the location going to be? It's either going to be room number or online. Okay. And then I'm not going to have a second office hour on Monday, so I'm going to skip that area. Okay, it's only if applicable. And then I'm going to say next, and here will be Tuesday and so on. Okay, now work with me just for demonstration's sake. We're not going to enter any other office hours right now. We're just going to scroll down to the bottom of every section. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Imagine if this was all in one section, how long this form would be. It's much more demo manageable in the shorter sections right here. And at the bottom, I then have an option to submit. Go ahead and say submit. And at this point in time, thank you for submitting your office hours. Your response has been recorded. If your office hours should change in the future, simply submit another form. So what does that mean? Well, that means that every response is recorded. But at the end, we might have multiple responses from the same person in our spreadsheet. So we may want to take a look at that every once in a while and see how we handle that. We'll get there.
I'm sorry.
Okay? Question?
I'm sorry, I just sneezed.
Okay, oh, no, okay. Sorry. Okay,
So the
Yes.
system won't override the last response.
the system will not override the last response unless you force people to log in with their Google account. So you can actually, and this is one of those, right? You're going to make it easy for the user, you're going to make it easy for yourself. And it's an interesting balance. I know faculty can be difficult sometimes. That's where you're trying to get people to fill out this form. And if you make it easy for them to do business with you by not forcing the login, you are helping them, and you're also helping yourself to get the information. But again, if the need to change it, and that's where you need to weigh, how often are they going to change it, right? I mean, some faculty may be worse than others in change. I mean, but just with this business example, obviously, right? To change all the time, then yeah, it can get really annoying to have to go in and look for the last one. But otherwise, I think you might want to err on the side of not forcing the login. I'll leave it up to you. But you have that option.
We do have a raised hand. Honku.
Okay, go ahead.
yeah.
How's it going?
Good. I have a question. Like, is there any way just one response from each person?
Yeah, it's similar. Good question. Similarly, with if you're forcing the email logon, then yes, then you can also force just one response from each person. And what it would then do is it would override, but you'd have to do it with a logon, and then you can limit it actually to one response at that point in time as well. Yes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to close out my preview that I've been in here at this point in time by going up to the top and actually closing that tab. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my other form. And notice, by the way, I can now see I have at least one response to my form, and you guys should have one response as well. Okay, but don't worry about the responses quite yet. We're going to do a little bit more work. Now, I want you to do one more thing. Go back and do another preview, a separate preview. But we're going to go in and we're going to change one response and go ahead and select spring 2023 again. But what we're going to do at this point in time, we're going to say, I'm an adjunct instructor. I will not be holding office hours during the upcoming semester. Okay? And again, put a last name in there. Put a different one in this case. I'm going to put Mickey Mouse. So whatever you guys would like. So we've got different folks. We're building some answers here. Okay? If you'd like to go with Minnie, be my guest. And I don't know, office, just put some content. By the way, you can force certain fields by making required. We'll take a look at the questions again in just a little while, and I'll show you how to do that. And that's the red asterisk then, right? That's a required response. Again, I tend to use those sparingly because I want to make it easy for folks. But sometimes you just need to have a way to get, like the phone number to get a hold of folks. So haven't put that in. Notice I'm going to do the same for the Zoom link. Now click next and watch what happens. Oh, I do need to put in the phone number. Click next. And here's my faculty hours submission form right here again. Okay. Here's the issue. This form was supposed to have forwarded to section 7, which no longer exists. So now we need to create another section. Go ahead and just go to the bottom and make another submission. I want to add some records here to this. Again, click next and just build a record and do a submit.
So technically, if you had that set up, then it would have just automatically submitted it without having you to go.
Not quite. It would have gone to the last screen. We're going to set it up in just a second. That's what would have happened. All right, close the preview, go back to the form. So now let's create that section 7 that we were supposed to go to. That's no longer there. Click on the very last question in the form, which is currently the Friday location of office hour 2. And then over here on the right-hand side, in your shortcut bar of different functionality, go to the last option at the bottom, which is to add a section. Go ahead and click that option after clicking on the last question first. And notice what we have just done. We have created one more section of our form. And just for the time being, let's call it wrap up. Of course, there's better terminology you can use, and we're not going to worry about the description right now, so create another section.
Sorry,
Go
I was in responses, so I didn't know what you did. Can you
Okay.
do that again?
Go ahead and, so did you close the response? Did you close the
I did.
preview? Okay, so scroll all the way down to the bottom,
Mhm.
select the very last question,
Okay.
and just click on it, and then select the new section button here near the top, near the bottom right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And the reason that you need to click on the last question is that the new section will be added following the element that you have selected.
Okay.
Okay, so
Thank
it's kind of important because if you don't click somewhere, then the section may show up wherever. They can be moved. Nothing is final, but I found it much easier to do that. All right. Well, within our section, let's add a couple of questions. Again, have that section selected, and then click on the plus sign to add a question. And we're going to change that multiple choice question just to a paragraph. And then it's important to word the questions carefully, because this is, whatever name you give the question is what's going to show up in our results. So if you have like a long paragraph in the question name, that's not usually helpful. So what I would put in here, for example, for the question name would probably be like something like comments. Okay, or you could put like other information, for example. And then remember, we have that description option. So go back down to your snowman, bottom right-hand corner, turn on your description, and then you can put whatever other information into the description to clarify this question. Okay, so be careful to separate the name of the element from the description. I would strongly suggest you keep the name of the element as short as possible. Again, that's what's going to show up within your results. All right, I want you to add another question. And at this point in time, we're going to add one that's going to be a bit more complex. And we're going to add, instead of a multiple choice question, we're going to add a multiple choice grid. Okay, and by default, a grid is one row, one column. We're going to make this a bit more elaborate here. Okay, and let me show you an example of what a multiple choice grid might look like. I'm going to go back to another form, and I'm going to go to the bottom of, hang on. There we go. Okay, so this is, for example, where I found an area for required reports. So to allow your area office staff to better support you, please indicate whether you have submitted the following or the required reports. And as faculty, we know we need to fill out our flex hours so that we can properly report that. We need to submit an instructor schedule, availability form, textbook, zero textbook cost, different kinds of things that we need to submit. Okay. And then there would be potential different kinds of answers that we could give to that. So let's see if we can recreate this in our own form. So where it says question, again, let's try to keep that short, call it like other reports. And I don't want you to do too much typing here, but go ahead and where it says put row 1, just put in like ZTC. For number 2, type flex. Okay, and notice I just click on add row to have other items that I want to add. I'm going to add 1/3 one, which would be availability. Okay. And so those are 3 different things that I may want to have somebody accomplish or report on. And the answers are going to be similar, which is why I'm actually able to use a multiple choice grid rather than have multiple separate multiple choice questions. So I can then say in column 1, already submitted. In column 2, we'll submit soon. And in column 3, don't plan to submit. Okay. Now, I've got an option here to require a response in each row. And of course, that's one of those, okay, do I make the user mark something, right? And in this case, I'm actually going to have you turn that on. That's not a bad thing to do. And of course, you guys know how to add a description. Okay, that's what we're going to do here at this point in time as well. Go ahead and add that description. Okay, and whatever that's going to be. All right. The advantage of a multiple choice grid is that from a real estate perspective on your form, you're going to be a whole lot shorter than you would be on multiple choice questions. Okay, so just from the way that users can respond, it's going to be a whole lot smoother. And I'll show you guys in just a second how to do that. Okay. One more thing that we're going to do before we test this form again is we're going to add one more question. So click on that plus sign one more time. And what we're going to do is we're going to add what's called a file upload. Okay. Now, before we can do anything here, we need to read this because Google Drive is telling us, okay, Google Forms says, all right, let respondents upload files to Drive. Files will be uploaded in the form owner's Google Drive. Okay, that's mine, right? Because you guys in this case, you are the form owner at this point. Respondents will be required to sign in to Google when file upload questions are added to a form. So Hanku, to answer your question again, so this is one of those instances where, yes, then it would be required for somebody to log in. Frankly, we're doing that to make sure we can, at least in some way, verify the authenticity of the source. Because if we didn't do that, if you think about it, really anybody could come and upload whatever they wanted to, which is not desirable. One more thing, and actually several more items to consider for this. I'm going to go to my presentation again here really quickly, because I do want you, before you set this up and before we finish this, to consider these options, okay? And specifically as they're related to file type, okay? What kinds of files do you want people to upload? And we'll get there in just a second, but you know, you may only want like PDF documents or Word documents, even though Word documents can be interesting. How many files do you want somebody to upload? Is there any maximum limit on file size? but more importantly, viruses, right? So whenever you are accepting somebody else's files, you better have some kind of a way to check for viruses, because this is not like an email attachment that's going to be checked by Exchange and by the things that come when you receive an email. This is something that is actually going to be placed on your Google Drive without necessarily a whole lot of checking going on in the background. Okay, so be cautious with what you allow to happen with the uploads. And where do those files go? They're going into a subfolder. We'll test that in just a little while as well with the same name as the question on the Google form. So it's once again kind of important what we call this thing, because that's going to determine the name of the folder where the files are going to be stored. Okay. All right. So we've got that warning. Basically, Google's telling us this is where, going to be, we have to do the login. Click continue. And then at this point in time, yep, I've got that same file upload limit reached at this point in time. Okay, but that's fine. We're going to, at this point in time, I'm going to change the settings and allow multiple uploads, and that's fine. Go ahead and click and change settings. We're going to go there. So for question, keep this as short as possible. I would call this reports, for example. Okay, because again, that's going to be the name of your folder. Or if you wanted to call it uploaded reports, to help clarify where they're coming from, that may not be a bad idea. Okay, and if we're only going to allow specific file types, go ahead and turn that option on. We can say, all right, documents, PDF. When it comes to reports, sometimes people might scan those, and if they're not 100% sure what they're doing, it might end up to be like an image. Okay. So those would be the three kinds of file types that you might want to consider, like a JPEG or a PNG kind of file. Okay, you can specify a maximum number of files, and just because we can, let's make it 5. And the maximum file size, 10 megabytes, is a pretty good size file these days. Okay, you can change that to less with 1 megabyte. Please don't do yourself the 10 gigabyte up. Okay, don't do that to yourself. Okay, so 10 megabytes is usually, it's a good number, and Google will pick that. And if right here you wanted to view the folder where it's going to go, you could actually click right here, click on view folder, and notice the folder where it's going to go is, I called mine uploaded reports. It says uploaded reports. So that's where it's going to go. This is where the uploads are going to go when they're done. Okay. And go ahead and close that tab again. We're going to be able to get back to it later. All right. So we've done a few things here at this point in time. We've created a new section.
We do have another question.
Oh, another question. Go ahead, Hanko.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, if somebody upload the PDF file, then can I like give them feedback with edit in it, or what do you think?
Yeah, so if you, now that's not through Google Docs or Google Sheets here at this point in time, but you could certainly do that with Adobe Reader, or if you, I know you're relatively new faculty here with us, but you can also get access to the Adobe suite. I'm not sure if you have that already, and you've got 2 licenses, so you can put one, say, on your home computer and one on your office computer. But yes, you could make whatever annotations on that PDF file, then yes, if you were to solicit it that way, absolutely.
So we can have access to Adobe Reader and those
Yes, talk
things?
to our wonderful IT folks, and they'll be happy to guide you there. But yes, as faculty, we have access to the full Adobe suite, so not just the Reader, but the actual Acrobat and Photoshop and any of those others. So yeah, talk to IT, and they'll be happy to set you up, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Through the main
Service.
Okay, yeah. So I'm hearing from Alma, who supports that area, that you have to put in a ticket through the
Service Central.
through Service Central, and
Okay.
they'll be happy to help you out.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, all right, good job to yes. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yes. All right.
That's why I normally ask them to submit Word file. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, if you wanted to, and again with Word, you can write with the virus. I mean, if you're running antivirus, which I know that those Rios computers all do, and hopefully on your personal PCs you do as well at home. But yeah, it's always good practice to have antivirus. But yeah, PDF is definitely safer than Word would be for sure. Yeah. Good question. All right. So now, before we finish, we're going to do one more thing. Let's scroll back up all the way to the top. And specifically, go to the question where it says, which office hours are you submitting? And that should be the second question from the top. And if you click on that question to activate it, I want you to go to the snowman in the bottom right-hand corner and notice there's an option checked that says, go to section based on answer. I want you to turn that off real briefly, turn it off, and to see what happens with the question. So now notice, if that option is not enabled, you have a typical multiple choice question with 3 different options. So go back to the snowman in the bottom right-hand corner, click on go to section based on answer. Now notice that the actual option text is currently truncated, but you now have additional options here at the end. And I want you to, at this point in time, as was initially intended, go to the I'm an adjunct instructor option. I'm not planning on holding office hours. And where it says continue to the next section as it corresponds, click there. And notice the different sections that we now have within our form are listed right here. And what we have the option of, as somebody was suggesting earlier, you can just say submit form. But since I do want them to give me some additional information, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm just going to have them go to section 7, which means they're going to do section 1, in which this question is currently located. And I'm going to have them skip sections 2 through 6, because they're not going to need to fill in these office hours, and just send them to section 7, which I ended up calling wrap up, and whatever you wanted to call it. Henku, yes. Is your hand still up from earlier, or do you have another question?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just forgot.
All right. No worries. Okay. All right. So we've got this option at this point in time, and that will help us with the control portion of our form. You guys ready to test this? All this work that we've done? Click on your preview button, your eye up in the top, and let's see what this is going to look like. All right. Yep, right here. Let's go back and let's say spring 2023. And then just to demonstrate that the control will work, click on I'm an adjunct instructor, put in some kind of a name. Some kind of an office location. I'm not sure what 101 is, but I'm probably in somebody's office where I shouldn't be. All right. Put a phone number in. The phone number is required. Okay. And you don't need to put in the Zoom link. And now click next. And notice we have just skipped all of the office hour functionality by sending our adjunct user to the end of the form, where she or he can then add additional information. Any comments? Right here, why not? And then, oh, here's these other reports. So yes, I already submitted my ZTC report. Notice, since we said that we have to, the response was required, our red option shows up at this point in time. I will submit my flex report soon because I don't want to get dock pay. And I did already do my availability form. And that leaves us with the upload. Now notice, I really should have put something a bit more descriptive in here to let people know kind of which files are accepted and. I didn't want to spend the time on the description, but I would encourage you to take a look at, explaining to folks what they might want to upload. But at this point in time, click on Add File. And you can now browse to anywhere on your computer. Okay, so I'm just going to pick a recent file that I recently worked on this up in my home area. And since I didn't specify, sure, instructions for my students' hands-on assignments too, why not? Okay, and this is just like an upload, like you would do with, like, for example, an email attachment, same kind of an idea. And then, so pick any kind of file that you have on your computer. Don't pick anything private, even though it's going to end up in your Google Drive, but still, it's the work Google Drive. So, be judicious. And then go ahead and say submit. Notice it took a little while longer for the submit to happen because the file needed to be uploaded. Okay. When I tested this earlier today, I actually did it with a relatively large file. It took about 4 or 5 seconds for the upload. Okay, good thing I'm not doing this. Good. All right. So now, again, I'm at the submit another response. Obviously, that's not typically, that's something that folks would need to do, but you're leaving them the option. So here you go. Question.
Did you write that as like to happen at the end of the form?
Yes. So
Okay.
good. No, but let me spend a second to actually go there because
Okay.
yeah, like
Thank
the
you.
thank you for coming and those kinds of
Yes.
things.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the way to get to that functionality is when you are back in your form. So I'm leaving the preview. I'm going back to my edit, and I go to settings, and then I've got the responses right up here. That response area. Okay. I've also got what's called presentation. So manage how the form is presented. And here's that confirmation message within that presentation area. So down here is where you can then, you can edit this whichever way you would like.
Oh, I see.
And the link to whether or not they need to really, submit another response. In this case, you probably wouldn't need them to, but so that's a link that you can turn on or turn off.
Thank you.
Be careful with the view results summary. Do you really want people to see other people's office hours? They may get ideas. But yeah, those are different kinds of, again, options that you can turn on or turn off depending on, how collaborative you want or need the effort to be. I personally like the progress bar because that shows up on the side and lets people know how far down they are in that form. I think that's helpful to tell people how much they have left to fill out. So I like to have that option on. And then in most cases, unless you're doing like a quiz or something like that, faculty, I don't think you would really need to shuffle the question order, but that would be an option where you can actually implement that. Okay. All right, but good question. So now I have 3 responses and you guys should have roughly about 3 responses. Let's take a look at those responses. So now let's take a look at, we've gathered this data and I've given you some additional tools beyond the first workshop, such as the upload, such as the multiple choice grid. Again, there's other questions that you can experiment with. But now let's take a look at how we can handle the results. And to do that, I am on the responses tab. Again, we've got our questions where we do the design, the settings where we just spend the time taking a look at the feedback, etc. And then in the middle is my responses tab. And that's where, yeah, this was all about spring 2023. And we've got a couple of folks who are adjuncts and one who was going to submit a finals week. And so we've got 3 responses. And as you scroll down, we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And sometimes somebody didn't input anything. So we've only got 1 response right here, right? So, but notice we can't, in this view, we can see the responses, but we can't associate them with any specific users. So this is really only so helpful. For statistical purposes, yeah, kind of cute, but it doesn't really help us trying to get our job done in, frankly, informing the students about when folks are holding their office hours in this case. So the magic button up here in your responses tab is link to sheets. Click there. Once you link to sheets, you now have the option to either go to an existing spreadsheet and add the input about that, or create a new spreadsheet. My suggestion, create a new spreadsheet is going to have the same name as your Google form, except it's going to be a spreadsheet rather than a form. So just take the defaults and say create. And what that will do is it will open a separate Google Sheet with the responses that have been submitted. And notice up at the top, there's actually a little separation bar between the first and the second line, because the first up on top are my field names. Now notice, just to see, on some of these, I was intentionally verbose, okay? And maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe this, which office hours are you submitting, okay? You might have just put something a little bit shorter that would have made this field name a bit more manageable. Now, this is certainly usable. We can work with this, right? But it may not necessarily be the easiest for you to look at long term. So you might have called this question, you know, like term or office hour category, or, you know, regular versus finals, something along those lines, right? And then gotten more information out to the submission, to the submitter of the form, the responder, via the comments or the description area. I'm sorry, the description area. So, but otherwise, okay, we've got, if we scroll across horizontally, so there's more information here. Yes, only once one person input their information about office hours. And we've got, well, we even have a hyperlink back there. Okay, we'll get there in just a second. Go back to the left. Let's do a little bit of analysis first. Got a trick for you. Control A on your keyboard. Control A selects all data. Okay, just like in Excel. So Google has adopted that same shortcut. And then within Google Sheets, we've got a couple of nice options of what we can do with the data. If you click on the data menu item up on top within your menu bar, the first thing you can do very simply is just to create a filter. Click that. And here's what you have now done. You have created, and if you've worked with Excel, it works the same way. And by the way, for those of you who prefer Excel, there's an easy way to actually export this data by saying File, Download, Microsoft Excel. Okay, so if you're an Excel aficionado, you can do that. Here's the one bad part about doing this with Excel. Once you've exported it into Excel, what you've exported is a snapshot of the current form. You've lost the dynamic nature of other responses being added to this very same form. So my suggestion for the functionality, you may be better off, if you want to always have the newest updates, doing it with Google Sheets, just so it's on one place, but the choice is yours. Okay, but I can now go in and say, all right, which office hours category? Notice in the top right-hand corner of this cell, and I'm going to make this just a little bit larger right here so you guys can see this a little bit better. I'm going to change the zoom. Okay. And get the, there we go. All right. So now if I click on the button that now shows up in the cell that contains my field name on the right-hand side, I click here. I can now go down to the bottom and I can select only certain options. So let's say if I don't want to even see the adjunct folks, because right now I'm just looking at office hours, I can turn off the display of the I'm an adjunct instructor. And then when I say okay, I now only see the full-timers. Okay, and of course, this was yours truly submitting the office hours for finals week. And I can even combine, so let's go ahead and undo this filter again by clicking on it again and saying select all, and then okay, now everybody's back. Okay, but I could also, if I wanted to, turn on multiple filters. So let's say I can do, you know, spring 2023 or whatever semester. I probably should have selected another semester at some point in time as one of the examples. And then, you know, whatever other category, I only want the people who have office hours on Mondays. I don't know.
Quick question.
Question.
Why did it add that line at the bottom, or was that line always there?
When you say,
The green line under.
oh, the green line? Okay. So that line actually, there's a concept of a range in a spreadsheet. So that green line defines the records that are part of this database. So when we set up the filtering, it only looked for rows that were populated. And then basically says, so it ignores all the empty rows that are below it. Yes. Okay, so when you look at the spreadsheet again, depending on it may grow with additional records, but you may need to turn that filtering back off and then turn it back on. Okay,
Thanks.
yeah, good question.
So if
Oh.
you have it set up this way and can you change the, like right there, can you change which hours, office hours to something else and it'll affect the form too, or no?
So I'm just asking if I now go back and make that change, is that going to update my form? All right, let's try that. What do you think?
On this side?
Or vice versa. I think she's asking if we.
Oh,
change
I mean, if you change it right here, you mean? Oh,
Yes.
no, ooh,
I'm thinking
I've
no.
never tried that. I've
Right.
never tried it. That, you know what, just for kicks, I'm gonna try this. This may mess things up, but I'm gonna try it. Testing. Okay, let's see if that updates the form. I'm gonna be surprised if it did, but you know what? Let's try this. Let's go back to questions. Yeah, no.
Okay.
It's still not.
But if
the
you
question
changed
was
it
also
here.
accurate. If you change it
would.
here, testing, again. And I'm going to close, actually, I'm going to close this form in all fairness, right? And then if I'm going to now go back to my responses and I'm going to go to view in sheets. So now it'll say testing again. Yeah, so then the update happens.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. But yeah, so it goes from the form to the spreadsheet, but not the other way. Yeah. So this is then the one thing that we talked about. So again, the filters. There's one more rather interesting thing, and I know sometimes we collaborate. So there's different colleagues that look at the same forms or the same data, and they look at the data in different ways. And this will be my last thing to wrap up because I know we're at time, and that would be what's called, and this is a wonderful feature I think in Google Sheets that I haven't seen in Excel, but they probably have. It's called a filter view. So filter view is individually to you. So what you can do with a filter view, let's say create a new filter view, and you can call it whatever you would like. Okay, I'm going to call it Marcus's filter. Okay, you can now go in and say, okay, I'm going to, hide certain things. There's only a few things that I want to be able to see. So like, for example, I'm going to hide column B, for example, in this case. Okay, this is only a way that basically you are overlaying your preferences over the spreadsheet. So a colleague could be looking at the same data. You're not making changes to the data in a completely different way than the way that you look at that data.
How did you get to that?
I selected data,
Oh, damn.
filter views, and then I created a new filter view here already called Marcus's filter, but you can create as many as you would like. So if you want to look at that same data, so let's say you want to say, I just want to see office hours. Delete all the columns that have nothing to do with office hours, and all you're going to see is office hours. Or I just want to see, form submissions still pending or anything along those lines. I can actually set that up and just bring up these different filter views and again, see different pieces of that data for what I'm trying to do as the person who's handling the responses.
And then you could share this particular view and not have them look at the original view? Like from here, I could share this spreadsheet?
Once you have it as is, what you could do is you could duplicate it, but no, you cannot share, to the best of my knowledge, you cannot share a filter view with somebody else because it's unique to you, to your.
I'm only asking because if, like, let's say I'm doing a response to, how did the event go?
Yeah.
And then you want to see the responses, but you don't want everybody to see who responded. So I want to hide the response named person. Or
Right. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You may be able to do some hiding and then with just a plain copy and paste.
Okay.
To see what happens. Let's try that real quickly. I'm going to take those 30 seconds. So I'm going to hide these columns. That's I just took the name out, as Amma was suggesting. I'm just going to collect this data right here. I'm going to say copy. I'm going to go to a new spreadsheet and I'm going to say paste. And I wonder if the names would show up. And nope, the name is still there. So it's really just, yeah, so what you'd have to do is copy it someplace else and then delete the data.
Oh, wow.
That's what I've done in the past. I
Yes.
just copy it and then,
Yeah, but of course, what you could always do if you want to get a bit more sophisticated, now we're talking Google Sheets, we're not talking Google Forms anymore, is you could build references from one Google Sheet to another Google Sheet.
Oh, that's another.
And
That's a
do it-
whole.
and do it. Yeah, that's another workshop. All right.
Let me know.
I can take maybe one more question. I know we're at time. Any other questions from away? Okay, any questions from here? Okay, I hope this was helpful. So in summary, what you should have learned today was on top of the existing Google Sheets workshop that we did last semester, hopefully you also had the opportunity to take a look at the subdivision of forms into multiple sections and how to define that sequencing by going to a question that is, and it doesn't work for all questions, but like multiple choice, etc., where you have the option of then, based upon the content, move to a different section based upon the selection. We took a look at response grids. We took a look at the multiple choice one. There's a couple of them you can play with. We took a look at how uploaded files are done. And then we also did some sorting, a little bit of formatting and filtering. Last but not least, what I'd still like to show you again as much as possible is where we ended up with the upload. And just at the one URL, where did it go? And the upload file ended up right here. It's the URL, and it ended up in your Google Drive. And if I click right here, here is the file that I uploaded, and I can just click and here it opens. So these are the instructions for the assignment. This just happened to be the file that I picked. But it ends up as a file in your Google Drive, and it's in that same folder where we set the uploaded reports, and that's where it's located. So that's where, but that's the one thing that we did not take a look at was that uploaded files. All right, I hope this was helpful. I thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at marcus.geisler@crc.edu. I'm also on campus regularly during my office hours, and you're more than welcome to, if you'd like to stop by, if you need, have any additional questions, be happy to help you out. And that covers it from here. Thank you guys very much for coming. And
Thank you so much, Marcus.
take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Maybe if we can get the recording sent back so we can refresh ourselves when it's, our time
Can you
to
end it?
work
Let's
with
see.
these.
That's very useful information.
All right. Thank you very much, Henko. Appreciate it. Good to see you, at least
Yeah,
virtually.
thank you.
Can you stop recording? Pretty please.
Yeah, just end the meeting and then go.
I'll just end. I got kicked out in the middle
Well done.
because I lost my power and
Oh,
had to go get a.
Power cord.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good to see you, Alma.
Good to see you too.
Stay out of trouble.
Hi, ladies. Good to
Thank
see
you, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your help. Okay, set up. Yes.
so this is really valuable.